Game Builder Studio.
Okay, now I'm going to add a little nice effect to the game where we're going to have the scene track an object and have it shake the camera. So in order to do that, we have to create an object and put a track entity action on it. And whatever scene that this object is in, whatever scene container, the scene container will track the X and Y coordinates. So we're going to randomly shake this object like this, and the camera will have that effect. So let's call this guy camera shake, just so we know which object we're going to put the logic on. And I'm going to put it in the top left corner at 0, 0 because I need to reset it when the camera shake is completed. And I will add a properties component to this guy, which is a data container. I'll call it properties. And I'm going to add a magnitude property on here. And I'll say about 20 pixels. We'll shake the camera about 20 pixels randomly. So I also want to track this object. So I'm just going to add a logic or a rules component rather. Logic tracking. And I'm going to just drop in a track entity action and have it track the camera shake. Where's that guy? The camera shake entity, and I want to track the renderer on that, and we're going to track by offset. Save that, and I will also hide the renderer using a rules component. Logic hide. I could add this. I could add it to the same logic track component, but I'll just put it on its own component. And I have to change the renderer's alpha value, and I'll put it to 0 because we don't want it to display while the game is running. Now I will need to add some state logic because I need to listen for the Hungry Hero's state changes. Call it logic hero state. And I'm going to point to the Hungry Hero, the hero state machine component. So I'll reference that component. And by doing that, I'll now have the mappings in here that I can map to. And I'm going to map to the hurt state, because I want to add a timer. I want this guy to shake for a certain amount of time. So I'll say 1 second. I'll add a timer in here. I'll call it shake timer. Shake for a total of 1 second. I'll leave run to completion off. If I left run to completion on, this would completely play through, but when the state changes to the flying reset, I'll just have this guy turn off. So you could have your own limit there, a manual control of how long the shake happens just by hitting run to completion. So I'll add a constraint property because I want it to constantly shake the screen while this timer is running. And we're going to change the position of this camera shake entity. I'm going to use an expression. I have it written already. And we're using a random value using that magnitude property that we created earlier. And I'm going to add that randomly to the X and Y position of this object. Call it random shake. Make sure that that's set. Random shake. Okay. Oh, and oh, that closed on me. It didn't save. So for 1 second, we want to do the random shake. Now let's run this and see what we got. So if I collide, alright, as you can see, the screen is not resetting, so we need to add a mapping for the flying reset. Now when the Hungry Hero character gets back into its flying state, when it resets, we want to reset the position of the camera tracking object. So spatial position, and we're just going to use a point object. Set it to 0, 0. Now let me run that. Now we have a nice shake effect, and the camera resets right after the character enters back into the flying state. Now the last object I'm going to add to the game is the lookout indicator. Now in order for us to have it aligned perfectly with the obstacles when they randomly spawn, we're going to have the obstacle spawn the actual lookout indicator. So let's look at the sprite sheet, and we're going to use frames 50 to 54. So we're gonna jump back, go back to the game. We're gonna drop the hero sprite sheet in here. And we'll go to the renderer and go to start at frame 50. Okay. Now we don't need this guy to have a physics spatial. I'll say basic spatial. Get rid of the old one. Make sure that this guy select the correct renderer. And I'm going to name this object lookout. Call it lookout, and I'm going to take it off the screen. Now I want to add a sprite sheet controller because we want to animate the frames. Just call it default. Select the sprite sheet. We're going to go from frame 50 to frame 54. We're going to mark this as the default animation. Now whenever this guy is created, it'll just automatically loop and play this animation there. And we're going to go to the obstacle template, and anytime this guy is created, right away we're going to use another rules component to spawn indicator. Say spawn lookout indicator. And just try to be descriptive as possible with the names, just so you know what is what. Now as soon as this is created, we're not going to add any conditions because we want it to run right away. We want this guy to spawn another entity, and the entity we want it to spawn is the lookout entity. Now we want it to spawn, I guess we could do spawn relative to the entity. By setting this to relative to entity, the X and Y properties that you set here will be added to the current position of whatever object is spawning this new object. So if this was unchecked, if you were to put 100 in the X and 100 in the Y, it would actually put it at that coordinate. But by checking relative to entity, it actually adds whatever you put here to that position. So we're going to just do a negative, say 200. And we don't want to add anything in the Y. We want it to be on the same line of where the obstacle is spawned. And we just want to move it over in the X, negative 200, onto the screen so that the player knows where the obstacle is going to be coming from, as a bit of a warning. So we'll call this spawn lookout. I'll save that. Let's run that. Okay, it looks like we got a bit of an error because of a reserved word. So I'm gonna go to the animation controller. Instead of using default, I'm gonna call this guy flashing, and I'm gonna set that to the default, and let's run that again. Okay, now the lookout indicator was not showing up because we need to increase the value along the X that it shows up. We need to subtract more along the X-axis so it shows up on the side here. We also need to destroy it after a certain amount of time. So let's add a timer. We're going to need to use a rules component. Call it logic. Destroy. And we're simply going to add a timer on this timer action. And we'll say after, I don't know, maybe 0.8 seconds, we'll use a destroy action. Okay. And we have to go back to the obstacle, to the spawner, and we will increase the value from 200 to maybe 450, I guess. And let's try that. Alright, so now everywhere that the obstacle spawns, it puts the indicator on the same axis as the obstacle, so you can try to, it'll give the player an indication so that they can try to avoid the obstacle. And I'll also move this guy up off the screen because this is the first one that's created. Okay. All right, perfect. Now that's that. I mean, we can speed up the speed of the food items, also speed up the speed of the obstacles and the scrolling speed. You can add those final touches if you'd like, but that's pretty much the Hungry Hero game. And you can add anything you'd like to this and kind of refine it. But that's as far as I'm going to take it for this series.